Hi everyone, welcome to day 46 of Adorned with Dignity. We are almost at the completion of this sefer. It has been a great joy to have taught it for a second time. I really thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for the amazing opportunity to share, my insights and my thoughts and my journey along with everyone else, and to also to hear how all of you have been, trying to navigate the mitzvah of not only tznuis but kisurosh in today's generation, which is, as we all know, has been quite a challenge for many of us. But today we're talking about supporting women in current times. And it states that we learned about how shaitels began to be worn in public in many communities. As explained, this occurred due to the decree of the Tsar and because of the physical, emotional, and spiritual weakness of the generation after the Holocaust. Now, if you remember, I believe it was lesson, I think it was 21. But don't hold me to it. But I believe it was entitled the outcome of the decree of the Tsar, in which we talked about not only how this minhag came into practice, and it was a necessity, but how it remained after the era of the Holocaust. And we talked about this place of brokenness that exists, especially when there is an extreme trauma. Now, for many people, they don't have to necessarily come out of the Holocaust to have some kind of trauma happen, whether it's physical or emotional, whatever have you. But there are moments in your life where it just seems like the world has just stopped, that you've gone through something and now everything is stopped. And sometimes it's so devastating to you that you can't even talk about it. And sometimes it does leave you questioning Hashem, has v'shalom. But we do, I think, to say that it doesn't happen would be, at least for myself, to say that even there's things that have happened to me and I've not struggled with them with Hashem, that wouldn't be amass. The truth is, there's been many things that have happened that I have struggled, but with Hashem's help, thankfully have gotten through the other side. And part of it is this concept of not looking back and to keep busy and going forward. And I think more so for my own well-being. And I find that in keeping with this, in time, Hashem was able to reveal a lot of his plan and why it happened. And in the end, I have to say that all things work together for good, and Hashem does nothing but good. And I'm really so thankful for his help in getting through many of the tough times of life. It says that Harav Aaron of Belz, the Shlita, attested that when the world will recover from the Holocaust, there will be a movement to return to the traditional head covering. And some women in today's time have come to the realization that our nation is truly fortunate that we have Baruch Hashem, that we are no longer oppressed by harsh decrees which force us to deviate from tradition, and that we have recovered from the horrors of the Holocaust, just as they try to fulfill every mitzvah in the Torah and in the most Yehuda manner possible. They yearn to do the same for the mitzvah of covering the hair, which is the Narrated. And thus, these women have courageously taken upon themselves to return to the traditional way of covering their hair with a kerchief instead of a wig. And some have decided to cover most of the hair with an extra covering, especially since the wigs of today look much more natural than those that are worn in previous generations. So we know in some communities, some of them, they wear very modest sheitel, but they have like a covering over it. And so, I had to go back just a step back. And I've said this a few times. I'll reiterate it again. Baruch Hashem, we are not in a place where, by and large, the majority of Yidden today, especially the ones in America, we're not facing those very harsh trials, those physical trials that our ancestors had faced. But what we are facing is this more spiritual, component. There's a spiritual component to all this now. Again, at the end of the day, how it began, how it perpetuated, how it remains, I think that the issue is now is that this is where we are, and what are we going to do from here? So now, just coming from Tisha B'Av, we're all just, today, on the day that this is being recorded, it's the day after Tisha B'Av. And, just coming from that place of really the sorrow that we don't have a Beit HaMikdash, that we don't have Mashiach revealed yet. I heard a shir, and it said, he said, the rabbi said that though the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash may not have been as a result of something from our generation, the fact that it's still not rebuilt is. So that was, it's a very serious thing. And I think with all matters, but, we're talking about kisurosh and tznuis, and this is in our hands. And this does have a connecting correlation, to the revelation of Mashiach, because we've said already previously that tznuis is the prerequisite of being able to hold the bracha. So it is really important, I think, that in this generation that we really come to grips with that. And, to an extent, you do want to educate people as to how things began. But the bottom line is that this is where we find ourselves, and we have to do something about the situation we currently find ourselves in, which, as we all know, is deteriorating. Has v'shalom, with Hashem's help, we'll get it back on track. And it goes on to say that Harav Benjamin Rabinovich Shlita gave hizuk to women who began covering their heads with a kerchief. And since most of the poskim were against wigs, and the holy women of today are no longer oppressed by the decrees of Gentiles, and they have in parentheses the czar, it is a mitzvah to encourage them in reference to this issue. And it also goes on and says, Harav Shlomo Grosh Shlita, the Dayan of Belz, attested that through covering her head with a kerchief, a woman brings zechusim to the neshamos of the previous generations who introduced the practice of wearing a wig in public. So very interesting. Very interesting. So now let's think about, that's a thought, what would our great grandmothers who were forced to wear shaitels that didn't even come close to the way they look today, but they were forced to wear these things out of their own safety. Honestly, I wonder how many of them cried that they couldn't wear their tichels and they couldn't wear them in public. And very interesting. I got to be quite honest with you. I don't know. And again, even this being the second time teaching the book, I never thought of it even from that perspective. So thank you, Shem. I think you literally just illuminated my eyes to something that I don't know that I ever looked at that perspective either. The sorrow that they felt to have to be forced into this. If only their words could speak now. If only their words could speak now. But I pray that this would give zechusim to them. Even in this, this year, we're going to dedicate it to all those who cried in silence. To all those who cried in silence to Hashem. And Hashem, you know exactly who they are. I pray that this year would be in their zechus, that they should see not only their descendants, but that their descendants would have such a great influence to all those who see them. So we're going to move on. Very sad. It really saddens my heart to think that women were forced in such a manner. So sad what we've all had to, what our ancestors had to go through. May we all be zochet to remember that and to honor them with our dress and our proper head covering. So it says the correct attitude. It says some of us may find it difficult to look up to those who have the zechus of covering their hair and the most who they're covering. And when women, even if she is very careful in her observance of many mitzvah, sees someone whose level of avodas Hashem is in a certain area is higher than hers is right now, she may downplay the righteousness of her, of the act, especially if this is not practiced in her home or community. We talked about this. Before and about how you become a mirror, and you're reflecting something that is not quite right within the person who's speaking the insult. And it says this may be due to the fact that she needs to quiet her inner conscience, which yearns to fulfill Hashem's will, and therefore she is zochet to perform this deed until she is zochet to perform this deed, as well as the other woman, she may ridicule it. So unfortunately, through this, she is unintentionally hurting her friend's feeling and diminishing others' enthusiasm for the mitzvah. As many women have attested, the most difficult part of upgrading their level of hair, covering their head, was dealing with the negative comments from other people. But I want to be more specific. I find that I myself, and I think that other women who have reached out to me, it seems that 99% of the time, the insults were coming from other Yidden, which I think is more upsetting. But I think it goes to prove this point here. So, Has v'shalom, if you're on the receiving end of that, we talked about this again. This whole, we were grasshoppers in their eyes. Remember, we talked about this, that if people, when you're in a mirror and you're reflecting that, they see themselves as grasshoppers, and they tend to verbalize that, except it comes out in an insult. So we're just so hurt and traumatized that we just heard what we heard, that we kind of glaze over the fact that this person as well is hurting. They're hurting for the fact that they themselves are not ready to take on a mitzvah that they probably really do want to take on. So, everything is about our perspectives, where we're holding. It says, such women don't realize that they can fall under the category of those who prevent others from doing a mitzvah. And one who falls into this category portrays that he does not have true avachas Hashem. In addition, they can transgress the adheres of causing others pain and shame. So let me just ask you this: if you're listening to this, right, and let's say you're not quite at that level, but you kind of do, maybe unintentionally, you tend to throw out comments that are, kind of dissuading other women. How would it feel if, as a result of your words, a woman actually took off her tichel? Think about this for a second. Because of your words, whether you want to if you're ready to upgrade in this mitzvah or not, but because of your words, a woman took on this tichel, she took off her tichel. And let's say she didn't even cover it all. Or she just went out with her bare hair. I mean, what would you do at that point? I mean, it's very serious. We all have to be careful with our words. We don't know the impact that our words can have on somebody. And I pray that Hashem would help all of us. So it says, on the other hand, we all have the opportunity to perform the highest form of chesed by praising and giving hizuk to these women, as Hazal teaches us. One who boasts another person with words is greater than all. So, I mean, again, instead of being the one who's giving the insult, turn it exactly opposite. And really give that hizuk. And instead of her taking it off, she's going to want to be more machmir in it. And in a way, you also get the zechus of that, because you helped her to perform this mitzvah, even if you yourself were not ready to do it. So it says that Rabbeinu Yonah advises that every person should strive to fulfill the simple deed, and he will earn immense schar. And it says, indeed, one who compliments another person is greater than the one who gives him money, and will be blessed with even greater schar than the one who supports him financially, as Hazal teaches us. It says additionally that if someone has an inspiration to upgrade her level of tznuis, we should encourage her warmingly and not discourage her. And when we do so, we will have a share in her mitzvah. So again, they just went over, they just said it. You're not there. You want to be so bad. So instead of in your pain, striking another woman with your words, just encourage her. And it will be as if you're doing the mitzvah as well. Until you do get, the strength to go on and do it. Now, again, there comes a point where everybody has to move. Just longing for it won't be enough. You have to take, it's really, it's a really big concept right now, this, all things positive thinking, which we all need. We all need that. But that's the springboard. And yet there comes a point where you have to take positive thinking into positive doing. And we also talked about this in previous year, about how this is the equivalent of buying a workout tape, and, by thinking that we bought it or we even watched it, that somehow the pounds will fall off. And the truth is that it takes more than buying, watching. You actually have to do it. And this is the same thing in Judaism. The things that you learn, you have to put into practice. If you just continue to say forever, I wish, I wish, I wish, then you'll be wishing forever. There is no genie in a bottle here. You actually have to go out and you have to do. And it takes practice. And, maybe 1 or 2 times, maybe 3 times, people will snicker. After a while, when they see that you're not going to budge and waver on this issue, they kind of leave it alone. And not only that, I think sometimes too, I think for yourself personally, it takes a little time. So I remember before, I got married, I used to practice putting on my tichel so that I could just get accustomed to the way I look, because it was going to be such a change. And thankfully, I think now the opposite has happened, where I feel like I almost have to get accustomed to what my hair looks like, because I'm so used to it being covered. So it says, thus, we possess a simple way of gaining boundless zechusim, as Rabbeinu Yehuda reveals. The reward for one who helps another person do a mitzvah is comparable to the reward for actually performing that mitzvah. And indeed, through complimenting the person, we portray a true ahavas Hashem, and we show that we are joyful that others are performing His will to the utmost and are providing Him with profound nachas ruach. And it says, the Bar Maim Chaim explains, whoever truly loves Hashem, it makes no difference if he performs the mitzvah or if others do it. So that's the thing. When perhaps one of the most ultimate ways to express love for Hashem is the fact that you truly want His children to do well. You want your brothers and sisters to do well. No parent wants to hear bad things about their child, and no parent likes to see their children fighting. It just, I can't even tell you how it immensely saddens Hashem. And, but the flip side, we have such an opportunity to give Him such nachas in a world, when He sees all this breaking out, that we can still be a light and we can still give nachas to Hashem by just a simple word of encouragement. So I want to encourage you all, really to, take a step back and really examine, your true, what you're reacting to, what your true issues are. This way you can, even if you have to list them, what are your issues, and then tackle them on one by one, investigate them one by one to see whether those issues have merit or not. And at that point, even if you have to bring a rabbanit on to kind of help you, I encourage this. But I think that if you yourself never have the conversation with yourself about it, you don't acknowledge that there are roadblocks there. And if you don't do that, you can't even begin the work to clear the roadblocks, and it takes time to do it. It's not something that happens overnight. But with Hashem's help, it does happen. And for some people, it happens quicker than others. But if you're a person that's having a really difficult time, you have to make a plan of action in order to execute it. It just doesn't happen on its own. So, that's it for today. And I hope we'll all be together again soon. B'ezrat Hashem.